You're watching a Tom Radigan movie review. Today's movie is the life story of one of the great legends of modern music. It is Bob Marley, One Love. Now here's your host, Tom Radigan. Do enjoy.
What is going on, guys? It is Tom Radigan, and for today's video, I thought it would be cool to do a movie review, considering, my channel focuses a lot on music. It is a music biopic, which is about the legendary singer Bob Marley, and it is Bob Marley, One Love. That's Bob Marley right there, and his wife Rita. This film was directed by Reinaldo Marcus Green, starring Kinsley, Ben-Adir, and Lashana, Lynch. It's a really interesting movie because I feel like I never really, of course I knew who Bob Marley was. I think Bob Marley, is an interesting musician, and also too, like kind of, public figure as he was. It's almost like, there are certain musicians where their music, but you don't know their face. In this case, you know his face, but you might not know the music. But he's got legendary songs. I mean, he's got Three Little Birds, which is Don't Worry, Every Little Thing's Gonna Be All Right, One Love, and of course, probably his most famous song, No Woman, No Cry, and other songs like Get Up, Stand Up for Your Right, and what's interesting, I guess, about this biopic is it the best film out there? No. Is it when it comes? I mean, listen, when it comes to music biopics, I'm very, very picky because, especially when I know the artist, like I know, like, oh, this fact is wrong, or no, this song didn't come out this year; it came out 3 years before that, or 4 years after it. Like, it's just when certain biopics mess up, especially when a filmmaker might when it's facts that it's easy to look up, and a filmmaker, they know that the facts might not be right, but they're just doing it to tell the story in a dramatic way to entertain people, because that's what, of course, these movies are. This is entertaining people, and I understand that, but I think aren't there ways that you can entertain people with actual facts? But I don't know. Maybe that's just me. But yeah, so I saw it with my friend Christian, and we saw it and we of course liked it. I think we enjoyed it, but then after we had our thoughts, I think the thing that was interesting to me about this biopic specifically is it doesn't start from the beginning. It starts from, it's not like a rags to riches type of story. It starts from when he's already a big superstar. And it's during the time of an assassination attempt on his life in Jamaica when he was, which we never, which was never proven of who planned to try to kill him and all that. It was a performance he was doing in regard to a peace concert, and it was with the Prime Minister at the time, Michael Manley, who was heavily supporting this. And the problem was that they were afraid that it was going to seem like he was endorsing him, and he didn't want that at all. He didn't want to endorse any political candidate or politician for that matter. He just did not want to get involved in that. He wanted to be involved with his music, by performing his music. He felt that was how it was going to change not just Jamaica but the world. That was his vision. And so it starts off with the height of of the tension going on in Jamaica, and early on it shows the assassination attempt, which I don't think is bad that they did it that way. I think it's kind of cool that they started from the beginning instead of going from the middle to the end. But I mean, what was interesting too is some people are gonna think that because in the film they showed nobody dying, that's not true. Somebody had to die from that if there were a lot of people that were involved and were injured. But no, I mean, the miracle is nobody died. I mean, Bob Marley, yes, was shot, and Don Taylor, his manager, got a lot of the bullets that were meant for Bob Marley. But when the assassin fired his gun, Don Taylor was in the way, so Don Taylor got most of the bullets, and Rita was in the car and she got shot, but her dreadlock saved her, and that's true too, you know. So that was interesting, and it was funny because before I saw this movie, I don't know that much about Bob Marley. You know, I honestly like wanted to look up certain information I can. My friend told me about a great documentary that came out in 2012, which I watched, called Marley, which captures his life in a good way to where you can kind of understand okay who this guy was, and also that another thing that was interesting was I looked up on I honestly just looked up Watch Mojo and looked up what facts they got wrong and what they got right before I watched the movie to know like okay what's wrong what's obviously right. And what obviously, I mean, you could kind of it kind of seems sort of fake or that it wasn't real, that he forgave his assassin and like that his assassin like came and asked him for forgiveness. That didn't happen. The guy who tried to kill him, like it didn't happen. Which he kind of know was kind of just more dramatized for the for the dramatic effect and all that. You can see that was just dramatized for the effect of moving the audience. But yeah, I mean, and also too, I mean, another thing that I thought didn't work with this film is I definitely feel like there was some imitation of uh biopics that have been out recently, like the Baz Luhrmann Elvis film and the Bohemian Rhapsody. Like I think like definitely, especially when they go into like the childhood flashbacks and all that of him as a child. I just think like I don't think that works well. Of like well, and what I mean by that is like the flashbacks, the dreams he has of his father who we never really knew. uh and I mean the flashbacks they have of how he started out with the Wailers, with their song Simmer Down, which was a song that came out in the early 60s. So they show kind of the beginning of what because of course Bob Marley is reggae music, but it shows the transition from what was originally ska music, and then it became reggae. So that I thought was interesting, that they showed a little bit of like the music before that, and how the instrumentation and the melodies of like songs like Simmer Down, and then going into songs in the 70s that he was known for, like Stand Up for Your Right, No Woman No Cry. I like how they show the story behind No Woman No Cry, with his relationship with Rita. And Lashana Lynch claimed that she did not want her to be minimized at all, because Bob Marley already has such an impact on people. She wanted to make sure that she was going to be portrayed well, and that was going to have a story that showed how strong of a woman she was, not just as his wife but even as a band member. And I think there's some great scenes that they have together, and she was such a important part of his life, and part of the music. They captured that well of like of their relationship. I mean, there's a great scene of the heartache that she has to go through with him. And one thing that I do think uh they could have focused a little bit more on was her how she was a part of the band a little bit more, like for instance on the stage. Like I think Kinsley Ben-Adir, they do a great job at showing him twirling around and all that. Like for instance, when you see the performance scenes, I think he does a great job at capturing the way Bob Marley moved around on stage. And but I would have liked to see a little bit more of the connection with Rita on stage. I thought that would actually be just as good too, and even showing a little bit of the band, a little bit more of the band about and like kind of shown the connection they had on stage instead of just Bob Marley. I mean, I get it, it's a Bob Marley biopic, but you should have also focused on the Wailers because they were just as important, I think, and I think they could have done a little bit better at that. That's just how I feel there. And another thing I want to mention that I kind of have a problem with is that they briefly mention things that were important to Bob Marley's story and life. Like for instance, the so Bob Marley, even though he was married to Rita until his death, uh, he was not faithful to her, and he had extramarital affairs and children with other women. They briefly mention that, and I think that's just something that they should have focused a little bit more on, because even though it's a biopic and you can look this information up, you would be lost in the story if it wasn't a biopic and a woman who's with him, who's his wife, mentions the children you have with other women, like just for like one little scene and like just for one scene of dialogue, and then boom, you never mention it again. An artist's personal life shouldn't be part of their music, and especially even with the biopic, it should focus on the music and who they were as a legend, and maybe not focus too much on their who their lovers were in their relationships. But I think the extramarital affairs, I think, are a big part of Bob Marley's story and who his character was. Now, two of the children aren't his. One of the children was Rita's from a previous relationship, and then the other was from an extramarital affair that Rita had, and Bob Marley decided to adopt that child. Now I think we should go focus on Kinsley Ben-Adir's performance. I think his performance was interesting. you know, I think, like I said, I think he captured the performance part of Bob Marley very well on stage, and I think even the mannerisms and the way Bob talked, I think as well, he does a good job at, like, especially like I like the interview scenes, and even like when the way he responds to certain questions. He's sitting to his family, and his wife asks, how did you come, like, when did you come up with that song? And he says, all my life, um and I think that's a really just shows you who Bob Marley was too. He even said in it, and I think this interview is in the movie, where he's like, my life isn't important, it's other people's lives that are important. He, like, that's kind of how he felt as a person. But also too, I think what's interesting about him, as a person, Bob Marley, is that, like, he really did care for people, but I also love that in his music too, he brings so much character with how he performed on stage, and also to his voice was just so interesting. But and Kinsley Ben-Adir does a good job at that. But I will say, when I see him perform, I know that's an actor playing him. It's not like the Elvis biopic, not the Baz Luhrmann one, the Kurt Russell one. Like, when I see that biopic and I see Kurt Russell playing Elvis, I don't feel that's Kurt Russell playing Elvis. I feel that's Elvis Presley. I didn't feel that was the case for this. I felt that the way Kinsley Ben-Adir was playing him was sort of similar to how Rami Malek played Freddie Mercury. Is that they did a good job at capturing the mannerisms, but it's not like you believe it's them. And also too, I think but his Bob Marley's family wanted this to be more just about, they wanted him to capture the spirit, and he does. But and he almost took like a method approach to this. Like, he was gonna lose weight, he was losing weight, he was having like terrible sleep habits, and they said, to him that, like, this is, we just want you to capture the spirit, we don't want you to copy Bob. And I think he took those words to heart, and I think he did a good job at perfecting his performance, and really trying to you know do a good job at portraying who this man was, and portraying the legend and the legacy, and just how important his presence was. Like, and like also too, like, with the accent, because Kinsley Ben-Adir is British. He does a good job there too. And also too, I do like how he responds like when they do the interviews. I think that's a great part of the film is how they capture the same feel of the original interviews, and they of course use the same lines. They're not gonna make up interviews, considering there are interviews of Bob Marley. So they're just gonna, like kind of, do the interview the way it was done, just for the movie. But also too, another thing I also want to mention that I talked about things that I thought were mentioned briefly, and another thing was the his cancer that he had. He was diagnosed with melanoma, and that was the skin cancer that he had on his toe. And they briefly kind of mention it and back and forth of, oh well, you should see a doctor, and oh, it's getting worse. I mean, I think there should have been more talk about that, considering in the Marley documentary they focus a lot about the cancer, and I think it should have ended there instead of the end of him returning to Jamaica and all that, to play a concert of unity for to unite the political rivals. Like, and when the film ended too, it ended so abrupt too. It ended with him going on stage and then boom, like that's pretty much it. I think it should have ended like how, so there are other biopics, like with Bohemian Rhapsody, they do it, and I'm not a huge fan of Bohemian Rhapsody, but I do think it's cool that they did the Live Aid performance, and they did the song from Live Aid, and I think even like with the Buddy Holly story, which is another film that I like as a story wise, but it didn't capture of course Buddy Holly's memory well, with the facts were incorrect and all that. But that's a story for another day. But anyway, no, what I mean by that is though the performances they in those movies they had like performances that kind of ended the film. This doesn't have performances that end the film. They should have done like songs or even like kind of like a medley of some of the performances. And what they also should have done too is they should have just had more of like the songs that for that concert really like were the standout songs. They should have put that in the movie, and it's just like, why did they not do that? That's just what I don't understand. I like when it ended of him going on stage, I'm like, shouldn't there be more? And also too, like another thing, when my friend and I were leaving the theater, like we definitely like I mentioned to him that I felt that was abrupt, and he said that too. He felt like there wasn't like they kind of like told us more stuff. And I was starting to, and I was like, oh right, right, like I kind of see where you're coming from. Show, don't tell. Show, don't tell. You can't just tell your audience what's going on. You got to show through stories, through scenes, through all that. Like you can't just like just tell like people that like, oh, like, because that's the thing. And what I'm talking about when it comes to talent is like the impact, and all that. I feel like they just told us more about his impact. They didn't really show us, and I think they could have done a good job at showing that in scenes. Like for instance, when we left the theater, it said, on the tagline that his voice changed music and his message changed the world. Um, we didn't really see in the movie how his voice changed music, I feel, and all that, or like I think they could have done a better job at even that. I don't even feel like they really addressed of just how unique his voice was to music, even like singing wise. I think that would have been important too, because reggae music, when reggae music came around too, I feel like when it became popular in music, people didn't focus on it still as much. Of course there was other music that was mainstream with punk or just regular rock and roll. So I think they could have focused a little bit more on that, but also too about how his message changed the world. They're really just there like, oh, he really is making an impact. Why don't we see scenes of him interacting with fans, or how musicians feel about his music, like they show like a scene with him and Mick Jagger, and him whining and dining with all the music executives and all that, but not really showing like who he is as as a perform, not just as a performer and entertainer, but of like the impact too. Like I think that's the thing though too. Like when you deal with somebody like Bob Marley though, and they do, but that's the thing. They're telling us that he's an important figure. There are other ways that they could have done that by shown in an artistic way. That's what filmmaking is. I will say the script for the most part I thought was written well. I thought like it was, it was polished for the most part. I didn't think it was like cliche or corny. I mean, you had Terrence Winter who wrote it, who was a writer for The Sopranos and created Boardwalk Empire. And speaking of Sopranos, you had Michael Gandolfini, James Gandolfini's son, in it, playing like a publicist and all that. And but yeah, and there were some other great performances too. I mean, I liked them how they had they showed Chris Blackwell, Bob Marley's manager from Island Records and all that. I think they did a good job of showing who he was, and the important part of his role in Bob Marley's career, and also Bob Marley's manager Don Taylor, too. Yeah, like yeah. So I think that, and even some of the, I will say though, I think that they should have showed a little bit more of the connection he had with the Whalers. I think that would have been a little bit, I think that there would have been a little bit more of a good emotional connection, or friendship connection for the film, and showing how he got along with not just people but even like the people around him, and even like more scenes with his kids I think would have been great too. As for like I said, when this movie came out, when it comes to music biopics, like I'm not a huge fan in a way that it's going to be great cinema, because I know that they're going to get facts wrong and it's going to make me not enjoy the movie. Yes, they're meant for entertainment, but also too, I feel like I said, I feel like you could be entertained with the facts. One thing I will say about Bob Marley's impact to musicians is like, songs like "I Shot the Sheriff," which was covered by Eric Clapton, and even like the reggae style that the Police used in their songs, were definitely from Bob Marley. Sinead O'Connor sings in the Bob Marley song "War" on Saturday Night Live, and when she did that famous, when that famous scandal happened where she ripped a picture of the Pope. And also too, I will say this movie made me realize too that like with music biopics, most of the times I know the artist pretty well. I didn't know that much about Bob Marley, so I feel like I really want to listen to Bob Marley's music a little bit more now, like, and listen to not just the studio versions, but also the live versions of his songs, because that's also really, I think, an important part of who he was as a musician, was the live performances and how he performed to an audience. There might be some videos you'll see in the future of me reviewing Bob Marley albums. You never know. So, that's my review of this film. If I had to give this film a grade, starting with a letter grade, I'd probably give it more of like a B minus C plus. On a scale from 1 to 10, from 1 being the worst, 10 being the best, I'd probably put it to 5 to 6. And also, to would I recommend this movie to people? Yeah, I would say if you don't know who Bob Marley is, then watch this movie. If you want to get to know really the true story, then I would say watch the Marley documentary that came out in 2012 and then watch this movie. But also, too, it is an entertaining movie. The acting is great with Kinsley Ben-Adir and Lashana Lynch. Listen, not every biopic is great, and it's not terrible. And I think that says something for me, because there are certain biopics I know that are like, oh, this is like they got all these facts wrong. This is entertaining to watch, and it's got an interesting style of directing from Reinaldo Marcus Green, and I definitely feel like I definitely should watch more of his films, and I look forward to any other films that he directs and all that, because it definitely seems like he has an interesting style, and I think it was cool to see Terrence Winter co-write this movie and all that, because I think Terrence Winter is a great writer. He wrote some of the greatest episodes for Sopranos. I hope you guys enjoyed this review, and like always, hit that thumbs up, hit that bell notification, and hit that subscribe button. And thank you guys, and see you guys in the next video. Bye.